David Goggins, Tony Ferguson, training together. Did you guys see it? Now, David Goggins is the epitome of fit. Is there anything more? I don't even know that he calls himself fit or in shape. Like, wouldn't you all like to be in shape? We've all used that expression before. I'm in shape. I'm out of shape. I'm working on getting in shape. He doesn't even speak that way. If you follow him, you are going to be like him, a savage. And it's very accurate. I mean, David Goggins' desire and discipline to burn calories and do things that test the mind from physical exertion at times that are completely inconvenient. He's special. I don't know anybody like him. I don't know who his hero would be or who he looked up to get to that spot, because I don't know of anybody that came before him that was exercising to these levels just to exercise. So set that aside. I've never met David Goggins. I bet you haven't either. And I bet what I just described, you liked the way I described it. Sounded right. I do know Tony Ferguson. I was teammates with Tony Ferguson. I trained at the Range Training Center every single day with Tony Ferguson. I have never seen anybody in my life work as hard as Tony Ferguson. That is a huge statement. All men want something common. Men have commonalities that they want, but to be the hardest worker or to be called the hardest worker in a group of hard workers, alpha type men want. You've likely never met a man who said the following words: I don't care if I work hard, or I don't care if people think I work hard. You've likely never met that person. Not that actually said the words. No. Big deal. For me, as a guy that's been surrounded by athletes and studs, dedication, hard work, all those buzzwords my whole life, the one that came in and took and yanked the carpet out from all the greats that I'd ever been around was Tony Ferguson. I had simply never seen a man work that hard. And I'd been around hard workers before, and some not in the room. The room is so inspiring when you can see them firsthand, but some were through video. Some were through folklore. Some I read about. Word of mouth. And every time I did, it motivated me. Every time I heard about one of those hard workers, I wanted to go put my shoes on. I was ready to run through a brick wall. That stuff would motivate me. It would not intimidate me. It was the opposite. I want people saying that about me. Until I was confronted with joining my teammate right next to me. Been real easy to be like him, Tony Ferguson. That's how hard he worked. When I saw other hard work, I thought, okay, that's what I need to do. When I read about the guys that were doing what I wanted to achieve, I think, okay, that's what I need to do. That's what it takes to step levels. I would take it home. I would make a presentation to my father. That came with the time that he needed to be off work to get me somewhere, to be part of these workouts, or it came with a financial element where I was going to make the ask, where he was going to try to get the money so I could go get whatever the apparatus was, until I saw the training of Tony Ferguson. It did not motivate me. It was a very different internal conversation. Chael, if that's what it takes, you need to find something else to do. Couldn't keep up with him. And it wasn't just me. The Range Training Center was a who's who. And there was days where Mark Munoz, who owned the facility, would turn the lights out on Tony. Think of like a warehouse. You probably only see him on TV, but lots of commercials where they hit the thing, goes boom, it makes a noise, and then all the lights go out. That's what our training room was like. It was this massive warehouse. And the only one in there would be Tony, and you could hear him. You could hear him if he was on the bag, or you could hear if he was jumping rope. You could hear the echo. It'd be the only one in there. And Mark Munoz would see him. He'd already told him to go home. He already told him it was over. Because there's only so much you can do before you start getting diminishing return, right? Where you take an iron on top of iron, right? Like, that's what makes a really sharp blade. But if you keep on going, that's what makes something really dull. It's a very fine line. And so Mark Munoz, not serving as building owner or as the guy that was going to get the electricity bill and couldn't justify an entire warehouse for one guy, it had nothing to do with that. It was his coach saying, you've done enough, stop. He'd turn the light out. And that didn't always run Tony out of the room. Sometimes you could still hear of the rope, and sometimes you could still hear on the bag. But this is how you had to deal with it. And I bring that to you because Tony is now with David Goggins, and David Goggins is inspiring him. He's pushing him. He's working hard, and RDA weighed in on it. RDA weighed in on Twitter and said, no, stop. I don't like these workouts. You are showing as Tony's vomiting, but not stopping. You are showing a proof of toughness. You are showing a grit and ability to dig down. To be a world-class athlete and to be pushed physically to the point that you even would vomit. That is a loss of the control of your body. But to be put in that spot would be very, very rare. To be any kind of a person and be able to push through that is not an excuse. I will not default back to being 5 years old, to calling my mom and going home because I threw up. A throw up was the ultimate one, right? Like they didn't have to put the thing down your right, they take your temperature. They didn't have to see if you were hot. They didn't need to check your appetite or just flat out ask you how you're going. If you threw up, game's over. You'd like to go home, go home. You didn't do your homework last night, but you threw it. You were sick. You like to take the day off school. You were sick. Throw up trumps everything. When you find a guy that will do that and push through, you now have a really tough guy. RDA didn't like it. Why? What about that doesn't seem great? Because I agreed with RDA, but I'm having a hard time with the word, so I want him to find them. Why, RDA? And I asked him on Twitter. I said, champ, I see what you see. I'm feeling what you're feeling. Why? I wanted to see if he could articulate it. And I waited a couple of days and I checked back and RDA blew me off. And I think I have the answer. I think I had it then, but I wanted to hear from the champ. You only have so much energy. And in workouts, we're going to condense it out into one day. And the veterans, the Tony Fergusons of the sport, when you start to enter that very rare air of a guy approaching 40, but he's still taking on guys that were just as young, he's still doing the same thing. And to go out there and compete with those guys that are closer to 20 than they are 40, it requires the same kind of training that you used to do when you were half your age. And the point that I'm trying to make is when you only have so much energy, where you put it is extremely relevant. If you're going to push yourself to the point of exhaustion, if you're going to push yourself that you're allowed to go beyond exhaustion, with throwing up being the middle ground, throwing up being the point that represents exhaustion, but the clock now representing how far beyond that can you go? If you're willing to do that, what would happen if you put that in areas that are directly going to correlate to the sport that you're preparing for? That was RDA's point, and I see it the same way. I don't question Tony Ferguson or Goggins. I question the amount of time they spent doing that. One of the best athletes of my existence on this earth is a man named Les Gutchison, and he was also the strongest. He was also amongst the best athletes. He was the fastest. He was in better shape than everybody. He was stronger than everybody, and he won more gold medals than anybody I had ever met. And he told me words that I always will remember because nobody's ever told me the words before. It had to do with your morning workout, which is your weight training. The morning workout is the one that's on your own. You can have a partner, but it means you set it up. The afternoon training is the one that the coaches and or the gym and or the team assigns and everybody gets together. The morning workout's on your own. And he told me in a morning workout, which should be strength and or conditioning based, that workout should not be more than 45 minutes. And in no situation, no matter how much you drag that day, should you be in there 60 minutes. That you must force yourself. He never said you need to do less reps, you need to do less squats, less intervals. He said you got to do them harder and faster. You got to be able to get in and get out in the morning, 45 minutes of work. The other 15 is cool up, stretch, cool down, high hello to somebody you might see along the way. And I just thought that it was very interesting. I was 19 years old when Les told me that. I could go for hours and hours and hours. I had no idea what he was saying, but then I became 29 years old. And then certainly at 39 years old, closer to where Tony is at, you've got so much energy, and that's all that you have. He's better having met Goggins. He is better as an athlete. He's in better shape. He's better. This is positives. I am not giving that a hard time, but I do like RDA's point that if you're going to be doing those types of things, to do things that are going to translate into the octagon. There is no stair stepper in the octagon, just to try to prove my point. I mean, I know from our sport that where we got to jump rope and jump rope and jump rope and jump rope. I get it. I got in the legs and you're light on your feet. I understand all of those things. I will not be judged on jumping, and there will never be a rope. There is so much time that we waste in this sport doing things to mimic and resemble the sport, but they really don't mimic and they really don't resemble it. There will never be a bar with plates on it where I got to move that in any which set direction, but hours and hours in a week, people will be spent doing that. And I think that this is what RDA is talking about. I think that RDA had a tip of the hat to the dedication, to the discipline, to the fact that Tony humbled himself to go find someone else. And when he found that great guru with the answer, he didn't find an easy one that wanted to tell people I'm with Tony. He found a savage. I think RDA saw a real compliment in that. I think he saw a concern that none of those activities are the activities that remotely resemble the unified rules of MMA. And therefore, it's energy wasted. I saw it the same way. I want to hear from RDA. His opinion matters, but I also want to hear from you. Am I close? Does that sound right?